Hello and welcome back to Listen Up Startups. Joining me today, we have Ayelen Denovitzer, the CEO and co-founder of Solvo. And for those of you who might be tuning in to Listen Up Startups for the first time, one of the main reasons we started the podcast was to give founders the opportunity to share their stories so that we can learn from the collective experience across the Listen Up Startups community. And also to cast a vision for how the ecosystems that support business and startups might be more humane, easier to navigate in future. And I don't think that you can really cast a vision without crypto coming up in the conversation. So I am really excited to have Ashlie on today to talk about how we might maybe make this more accessible for us laymen who are not financial experts. So without stealing all of your thunder, would you mind introducing yourself to the Listen Up Startups audience?
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So as I mentioned, I'm co-founder and CEO of Solvo Finance. And essentially what we identified is that crypto is indeed overwhelming and daunting for the vast majority. And we do see that crypto or blockchain as a technology applied to financial services is super powerful. So it is intrinsically better than the technology that we now have in traditional finance. But we're very early stage, right? So this is a better technology, but we're not quite there in the sense of having a final product that is useful and accessible for everyone. So that's what we're trying to fix. And we try to bring a solution and a product that is simple, transparent, that people can trust and to understand what is going on and not just jumping into something without knowing what's happening behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I love anything that involves transparency where investing is concerned. And just kind of looking into your background, it was interesting to note that you're ex-Revolut. I was a Revolut user. That was the first business bank account that I set up here in the UK. Coming from the US, trying to open a bank account was one of the hardest things. I'm trying to give you my money. Will you just take my money? But I basically had to sign away my entire life. So I think the UK just has some money laundering problems. Who knows? I don't know. But, it's interesting to hear you say, because Revolut was, and, the similar banks was disruptive, I feel, and provided a much better user experience. And so to hear you say that what I'm doing now is even better, I'd love to spend a little bit more time about why that is.
Of course. So I do think there was a huge wave with neobanks and how they disrupted how we open a bank account, having everything on our app. And I think neobanks or these financial super apps, they offer more and more products each day. So they are this all-in-one financial services super app. And that's great. And it solved many of our issues. But again, the underlying technology and the money flow and how that works is actually the same. It's like the UI and what the user sees has improved massively, but the underlying technology is just the same. So it's the system is quite consolidated in a number of banks. How money flows from one bank to the other is still the same. So anyway, it has been the same for the past hundreds of years. How crypto works, and in the sense of putting together all these small pieces or these validators or these people all over the world working together to validate transactions and build an ecosystem instead of being quite top down where an institution has all the power and they determine different rules. Here, there's the whole concept of a consensus mechanism is so different and better. It works because it aligns incentives. essentially. That's blockchain by definition.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. And is this the first time that you have founded? Was this sort of a jump out of corporate into doing your own thing because you felt so passionate about solving the problem?
It is. It is. Yeah. So actually, I started my career in consulting, in strategy consulting, back in Argentina, and for me, it was quite a big jump um, to move to fintech and relocate in London. And after that, it was like, okay, this is I have to work on this. Like I have to at least try to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Um, because complexity and UX UI, it's a huge issue and the highest like barrier of entry to crypto for many. And it was literally the only thing I could think about. And I was excited to work on.
Yeah. And I think that's really powerful because I think, when you are making the move, especially when you have experienced traditional success within a well-known brand, that's a scary leap, right? And
Yeah.
I know, at least in my experience, when I was part of my first founding team, I left Monster, which was a globally established brand, with a team of people to go start up our own thing. And it called into question a lot of almost like identity issues, to be quite frank, because you walk into conversations with the credibility of this global brand behind you, and now it's just you you and your expertise and your passion and your dream and what you're trying to build. And so I think a lot of folks find that shift from corporate leadership to entrepreneur quite jarring at first, because you have to redefine your self value, your self worth. And was that a similar experience for you?
100%, actually. So I took the decision to leave Revolut without actually knowing what I wanted to do next. And I, I spent 100% of my time in crypto. So 24/7, I was reading about different stuff. There was a lot going on in this space. And I knew this was there and it was bugging me. And I just needed time to make the decision. Like, okay, am I doing this? Like, am I going to try to solve this huge issue for this really fast-paced industry? It was quite intimidating. So it's not like, oh yeah, I'll just build my own thing and just like it's nothing. I was very intimidated by the challenge.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it genuinely was the one thing I was passionate about. So I couldn't be like, okay, I'll hold it back just because it's scary.
Yeah. And were there any people or tools or things that helped you overcome that fear to get this process started, especially in this world where it's like, you're facing a strong incumbent in terms of, crypto still feels so new to everybody and frightening. And there's, I think, the institution, if you will, is like there's, especially in 2022, it was like a tough year. There was, a lot of distrust that bundled up under the surface, and I think maybe cast an unfair discredit. I think you had bad actors that, put like this, so there's just a lot going on, in terms of like you deciding this is a problem that needs solving. I'm passionate about solving it. What did you do to fortify yourself to take that step?
So I started Solvo with my co-founder, Shailandra, and I think having someone who also believes this is not nuts, or who believes this might be nuts, but is willing to go for it. That was very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think different conversation with different people. I don't know, my brother, so close people who are close to me, and who encouraged me to try to build this, because it genuinely is something I really wanted to do. I'm not doing it because it might be intimidating or I was scared about it. I wouldn't have forgiven myself for holding back.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think it's so important that those relationships around you, because it can feel very lonely when you're going, especially when you're trying to do something that's so big that a lot of people might think is crazy. Having, even if it's just one other person who's just like, nope, I see you, I understand this. And so having that support does wonders for your mental health as you navigate the process. And I know in a lot of my work with my clients, we talk about funding strategies. And I'll go ahead and give the caveat now so you don't have to have a heart attack. Not asking for any type of investment advice here at all, but just, trying to open up an honest dialogue for folks so that we can start to think differently about how to fund our passions and our dreams. And, is there a possible role for crypto in that, even if you know nothing about it, especially with kind of the state of affairs in the traditional funding routes ecosystem right
now. Okay, so just to clarify and understand if I get this right. So how to get started in crypto, like investing in crypto?
Yeah, how to get started, and how to make it less scary to think about that as a possible alternative funding route to just knocking on the doors and pitching a bunch of VCs.
The market conditions might look intimidating in the sense of there's a recession, there's a bear market, both in stock and crypto. But this also gives people the time, and I think many of the mistakes are made during a bull market because there's this whole rush in sense of urgency, whereas in a bear market it gives you more time to think things through, and very valuable projects are built during this market. So if you're starting to or want to start navigating the crypto world, it is actually a good time to educate yourself, understand what are the problems, what are the value props. Educate yourself, I guess, is the most important. But I don't know if you're interested in Metaverse. So we try to help on that end with different product on a company level, with different products, with tackling the educational part, tackling bringing a diversified basket of assets. So there are things out there that can help you start testing the waters and not feel completely intimidated by a space that can get really complex really fast.
Yeah, and I think that's what can be challenging for folks is, I think a lot of the folks that I speak to, they want to maintain control versus optimize their strategy for wealth at the moment, especially like mission-based, like social impact companies. It's about making sure that things stay true to the values of the organization versus just like constant shareholder returns. And so I guess I probably wasn't very clear in my question, but I think, there are a lot of different potential like revenue channels that you could open up if you're even for traditional like services businesses like coaching or consulting. Like if you can offer things in virtual worlds, you can even support therapy in virtual worlds. And what does that delivery look like, and what type of currencies are you accepting? But as soon as you start mapping all of this out, it becomes like, especially for folks who maybe this is their third company, they're used to approaching things in a certain way. It gets really scary fast.
Yeah, and I do understand how So you were mentioning this example of, I don't know, maybe going back to Metaverse example. So some people are holding meetings and events and sessions in that way, right? Or start accepting payments. I also understand it's hard from a technical complexity perspective, but also how do you tie that back with the rest or your traditional life, like money flows, and how to reconcile that, and how do you manage? You need people to, so if you're holding a session, you need people, the other party, to be open to that. So I think adoption will take a bit longer, but there's so many use cases for this, and for this type of innovation, that it's only a matter of time, and also give time to your technology to evolve, and to people to feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any, like, if you had somebody approaching you who was just brand new to the concept, and because I think a lot of, it's interesting because not many folks actually know how money works either. Like, but I think it's a lot easier to hide behind that. I think there's like a bit of shame that you're not with it, or you're not educated. Like, if you don't, almost like you're a bad entrepreneur if you don't understand crypto. So like, people won't admit it. They're like, oh yeah, totally get this. And you're like, oh no, I've got no idea what I'm talking about. So like, if you had like just some basics in understanding and demystifying crypto, like what would that education look like for the audience?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting point, because the first, or one of the first type of responses when you start talking about crypto and how there's value there, and crypto in the sense of just cryptocurrencies, right? People would be like, oh, but that's not real money, right?
Neither's real money.
Oh, and that's kind of my answer. Like, oh, okay, and how are dollars real? Oh, but I can touch dollars. Okay, and why is it worth what it's worth? Because the concept of the reserves and being backed by gold, like it's not one-to-one, right? So
right. Well, and we untethered from the gold standard in, what was it, 71? I think it was, that we did away with that. But no one knows that. People still think that's
exactly
how it works.
Exactly. But actually, fiat money, so dollars, euros, any currency, they are worth whatever they're worth, because there's an agreement with people, like tacit agreement, that this is how much a dollar bill is worth, and this is what it gets you, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there's a printed paper, and I can also go and, I don't know, like print another paper that has Bitcoin. It would be the same, right? So the point being that how much is worth is, it's not that different, actually. I think people have a misconception of how traditional money or fiat works. Same with like, oh, but I have my money in my bank account. Well, actually, your money is not. It's not in a box that with your name tag on it, and it's sitting there. It's been lent. So there's a whole system and mechanism that people don't know about, and they just accept it. So it's funny how when they're quite skeptic about the value in crypto, what they claim is that it's different from how it works in traditional finance, when it's actually not that different.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll hold my hand up, because I think we need more people who are willing to admit that, that you sort of taught something when you're 17 or 18, and then life moves really fast. And unless you're proactively revisiting that, like, I was 100% one of those people that didn't really, like, deeply understand how money worked. I would say until I would say Marco Donde's book Outgrowing Capitalism really said that, like, explained it in a way that I was like, oh, makes total sense now, and I think a lot of people have been operating on really outdated assumptions about how our financial ecosystems work, and particularly older generations, which I totally get, because I mean, if you were banking pre the 1970s, then yeah, that your cash in your hand was physically tied to a rare natural resource. Like I get that, and there's safety in that. But I think it is really, really important for folks to realize now, and as you said, to educate themselves on the fact that like everything is digital. It's like somebody's just pushing a button and the numbers are changing, and you've really got commercial banks and central banks that work, and it's mostly the commercial banks that are controlling that. Really, it's just inflation rates that are sort of like the one lever that central banks can pull. So we're kind of like, we're already there, right? Where it's like, this stuff is not real. And I think one of the concepts that the book brought up for me that I'm still kind of mulling around and really trying to deeply understand is like this difference between finite and infinite, right? When it comes to money. And it's my understanding that one of the problems that cryptocurrency and new currencies are trying to solve, because some countries are toying around with like local currencies, is making money finite, making whatever alternative to our systems we have like finite, because right now it's not. And that's how we're kind of getting ourselves into all of these big inflation upswings and downswings. So I know I've probably gone a little bit too technical for the audience there, but I do think it's a meaningful dialogue for us to open up to kind of better understand that. And is my layman's assessment of that situation accurate?
No, yeah, I mean, that makes 100% sense. And so Bitcoin is finite, right? So there's 21 million, that's it.
Yeah. That's
the whole supply. And again, I don't want to give like any type of financial advice on it, but it kind of, like, okay, here, there's kind of a potential solution, or at least the approach, right? Or how it could be intrinsically better, or trying to solve this type of problems that we might have with currencies these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, just to remind the audience, I'm not pushing for investment advice, just trying to open up, I guess, things to think about that maybe you haven't thought about before. So for our listeners, I would highly encourage you to go do a little bit of digging about the shifts in how money generates its value these days, how that's changed, since the 70s, and to start exploring the concept of finite versus infinite when it comes to currencies, and draw your own conclusions. I think it's a meaningful dialogue for us, especially as we're thinking through what we want our revenue and investment strategies to be. But like you said, it does get complex quickly. From a user experience on the app, if I were to download that today and walk in, like what are some of the tools and resources I could expect to help to like make this educational journey a little bit smoother?
So a couple of things. We know that there's a lot going on in crypto. Again, it's a fast pace. There's a lot of great teams working on different products and projects. So sometimes it can be overwhelming, and okay, where should I start? I can't read 100 white papers before diving into something. So we do want to bring help on that and do the heavy lifting. So we only bring products that we actually see value in. We don't list the 20,000 tokens that are out there, only the top 10. So we try to help and guide people on that. And it's like, okay, these 10 kind of make sense. They're worth exploring. We try to make the whole product flow as simple and clear as possible. So if it's a passive income product, super easy to get in from euros, pounds. So from your local currency to the token that is sourcing the yield. Where is the yield coming from? So trying to give all the information along the way to make it quite clear and cover all these questions that people would have, like how it is converted to this currency. Where is my money? So where is my money going exactly? What is the source of the yield? Is it being lent? Is it being staked? So trying to give as much clarity as possible without overwhelming the user and just like bringing everything, and then you just don't know what's relevant and what's not. So key things and key questions that the user would have when trying to make a decision, we try to cover those points along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And just to kind of bring things back a little bit to your personal founder story, you mentioned that you have a co-founder. Tell us a little bit more about how the two of you decided to take this journey together.
Yeah. So actually, I met him at Revolut. We worked together. He had left a couple weeks before I did, and again, I was just trying to get my head around what I wanted to do next, and we were both spending 24/7 in crypto and what was going on, what was new, what were the pain points, and we encountered firsthand how complex things had gotten. And sometimes we'll be like, hey, do you know how this is meant to be? Am I getting this right? So it was like, okay, if we're spending so many hours a day in this space and we've been here for a while, it's virtually impossible for someone who doesn't have the time or the interest to dig deep in each project or product. And again, this is quite a big problem impacting a lot of people. So bringing this and helping people with this transparency and simplicity, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, this needs to be fixed because there's been so much innovation and the technology has improved so much. It's like we're looking at the bare bones of the technology and the processes, and we don't have a wrapped up product using this technology. I don't think blockchain is the final product. It's the rails to do other things. So products are being built using this as a technology. And when you compare that to traditional finance, most people don't know. When I go into the app and I send you money with whatever app, most people wouldn't even know what's happening when I click send.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very sleek experience. I just select the amount, who I'm sending it to, and I click send, and it's gone from my bank account. Technically, it looks like it's gone, and it looks like, and you get a notification on your side, but you're not looking at what's happening. And I think in crypto, that's exactly where we are. We are building the rails, and it's a no-brainer that we do need to build a product that is powered by this technology. Yeah.
That's so cool. And one of the stats that we talk about a lot on the show is that 65% of startups actually fail because of relationship conflict across the founding team. And a lot of the other things that are cited are symptoms of tough conversations not being had, a lack of, all humans want to feel seen and understood and like respected as they navigate the process. So do you have any tips and tricks for keeping a healthy co-founding relationship?
Communication, I think that's the key. And you need to know the person you're starting this with, right? You can't, I'm not a believer that you can just find someone by looking at their CV or something, and it's like, oh, okay, I'll co-found something with this person, because it is a roller coaster, and it's a tough journey. Sometimes you have to be with someone you trust, that you share core values, because that you can change, and there's going to be times where you have to make decisions, and you have to be on the same page. And if you're not, you need to be able to have a conversation about that. And that's not something you need to know the person and what you're getting into. It's like getting married in a way, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And our listeners hear me say this a lot, but I ended up getting certified in behavioral, a couple different modalities of behavioral therapy, because it is true. You almost need like couples therapy for co-founders as you navigate this process, because you're up against high pressure decision making, fast-paced decision making with a huge impact. Like, my husband and I make a decision today, it affects our family of 5 and predominantly 3 kids. When I was on a founding team of either of the companies, I had like a minimum of 35 people just in our organization that were impacted by that, and then that had a knock-on effect of each one of their families. So it's just that scaled impact of if you are making decisions from maybe a place of emotional dysregulation, it can get really tough. And so I do think that as an entrepreneurship community, we could do a lot more to support founders on that journey, because heavy stuff does come up and you do need to be able to make decisions from a healthy place. But I wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned in terms of making sure that you have aligned values, because this one is huge for me. And it's one of the first things that I encourage my clients to do, is to just sit down and get really clear on their values, or to revisit them. So did you, and my guidance is try to get it to 3. Because some people, it can be compelling to like tick off all the values that you think you should have. Like, I want to be a really kind person. Like, okay, but maybe that's not the most important thing, and maybe that can slide into another values umbrella. But did you already know your values? Like, were you and your co-founder able to sit down and be like, yeah, bam, here's my 3, or was that like a bit of a journey that you went on together?
I think we didn't have like an explicit conversation about it, but we had worked together on 95%, if not 100% of the projects together back at Revolut. So we knew each other quite well, how we worked under pressure. We did have a conversation of, okay, like, what's your motivation? What do you want to, why do you want to do this? What do you want to get out of it? Because people might start something for very different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not aligned on why you're trying to solve this problem, and maybe for some people it's like, oh, I want to work on my own, or I want to build something I can exit quickly. I don't know. There's different approaches.
Yeah.
All of them are valid. So I think why you want to do this, you need to have the same answer, 100%. Because that's going to take you, implicitly, you're going to go back to that when you're making a decision to move forward with something, or to pivot something. What should the team look like? Who do you want to partner with? What are you looking for in investors? Everything. Yeah. So the why doing it, I think it's the main question you need to be aligned on.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you, kind of putting you on the spot here, but did you have conversations about, when essentially about control, and who has the final say? Because that's one that I think I see that conversation being pushed off more than any other conversation, and it comes back to bite folks. So is that a conversation you had up front?
Yeah, that's a conversation we had up front. And I think we we both understand what each other can bring to the table, and we trust the other person's judgment. And if it's something one of us knows more about, I think we are on the same page to not bring the ego into that conversation and understand what's the best. And if the other person, it should be A or B, I'll trust that, because it would be a very big issue if you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is amazing. I think folks, rightfully so, because you want the business to succeed, and even the most socially minded companies, you need to turn a profit. So a lot of thought and effort goes into the revenue strategy, into the go-to-market plan, all of the business elements of getting things off the floor. But the human elements outside of maybe headcount are oftentimes, kind of backburnered or intentionally avoided because they're really uncomfortable. It's like, I like this person, but I don't really want to ask for this need to be met because it might make them uncomfortable. So it's refreshing to hear that so much dialogue happened. I think that it was, you had a benefit in that you worked together for many years and got to see each other in the trenches. That was the case for myself and my founding team. But interestingly enough, I think there were still conversations that we didn't have, particularly on your point around like the why. So we had some folks on the team who really just, I hate the term lifestyle company, but it is what it is. Like, they just wanted to make a nice profit and deliver a good product and try to keep things as calm as possible. And then we had some others on the team, and admittedly I was in this camp. It was like, we just want to change the world. And so you have these two people like, I just want to sip a Mai Tai, and they're like, nope, I'm gonna go make a whole bunch of people angry. And so that created some fun. For sure.
I think that's the underlying thing. You would want to work differently. You want to achieve different stuff. Yeah. So naturally, you would actually be working towards different things in a different direction. So yes, so you need to align on the end game.
Yeah, absolutely. We learned that lesson and we figured it out for the second go. But
yeah, some stuff you do learn, a lot of stuff, most of the stuff you learn along the way, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And it's just, I really enjoy having these open conversations. And I know you and I talked a little bit about this previously. I just think there's sort of this really veneered perception about what it means to be particularly like a tech founder. You've got a lot of what I would consider dangerous dialogue, that you can just like walk out tomorrow with an idea, sign up for a course, and in 6 weeks you're gonna have a 7-figure business. And it's just like, that's not like, it's hard. There's a lot. I've always said to everybody that the first company that we built, that was like a trial by fire MBA. I grew more as a human being in the 18 months that we bootstrapped that company than I had in the previous like 26 years of my life. And it was insane, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like, I learned who I was as a person, how I wanted to interact with the world. But like, there were parts of that sucked, like that really hurt, And so I think that the more people are open and honest about the mistakes that they've made, as well as the amazing revenue figures that they drive, the healthier of an entrepreneur community we will have, and the better suited we'll be to actually solve the problems that we set out to solve, because we don't just feel like we're giant failures every time like we step in something we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I have this $1 billion idea. If only I had done it. Yeah. Or, okay, I have this idea, and that's it, right? Solved. The idea is like not even 1% of what you have to do.
Yeah.
You're gonna have and my take on that is that, like, don't fall in love with an idea. Okay, like fall in love with a problem if you want. And then you'll find a way to solve it, not the idea itself. But yeah, there's this concept of, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to have my own thing, or I have this idea I should build and it's going to be a success. It's hard, okay? I don't think people stress that enough. It's hard, it's frustrating, there's good and there's bad days. It's a roller coaster. Great days are off the charts. They are amazing, but there's also very not so great days. Yeah. And you have to be ready for that. And if you're passionate about the problem and you do want to solve it, you'll put the effort on it. I mean, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of energy. It's not a side project. Or it is, right? But then it's something different. Then it's a side project. Yeah. Like you can also have that, but it wouldn't necessarily be this. You have to be ready for those ups and downs. And I think the whole concept of entrepreneur, it looks way sexier from the outside, massively. When you're doing, you gotta get things done, whatever it is. Yeah, and you might not know about it, and you have to figure it out. And you're not an expert on something, but someone has to do it. And most likely you're a small team, if not yourself or one or two more. So you can't be like expecting, you can't get picky. If you want to build this, just getting there, put the effort, get things done, and be ready to feel like you don't know much about anything, but you will figure it out one way or the other.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the concept of, falling in love with the problem that you want to solve, and then staying open-minded about the most effective and impactful way to solve that problem as you navigate the process. I think that is just phenomenal advice. And what an amazing problem you're focused on solving, simplifying and providing transparency around something that, a lot of people are really, really intimidated by, but has some really positive future implications, I feel personally. So thank you so much for joining the conversation today. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, because there was a big announcement yesterday, an integration announcement yesterday.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean for Solvo users?
Yeah. So yesterday we announced that we partner with Fireblocks. Fireblocks is a top tier company who does custody. So as good as it gets. We are in the mission to only work with best-in-class companies, provide the best products to the user. Because yes, it's hard to navigate and it's a busy, messy space, but there's really good products and companies and solutions out there. And we do want to help only partnering with those so the user has the best experience possible.
That's amazing. I love that. And so for any of our listeners that want to follow along with your journey or to get help simplifying their understanding and maybe taking the leap into investing, how can they engage with Solvo?
Yeah, so you can find us on solvo.finance, Solvo in the App Store, or Solvo Finance in any social media, Instagram, Discord, and Twitter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and I appreciate your patience with my honesty about how little I don't know, because I'm not ashamed to admit it. And for the rest of you out there, if you would like some additional support in your well-being journey, please do head on over to your app store of choice to download the 7 Summits app. It is free for all users. We have got some serious container building going on for this year, so you'll see a lot of new supportive programming. All of the startup therapy resources are now just in a sub bucket on the 7 Summits app, but we've really opened up access to that. So if you need some additional support, that's a great place to go. If you've got any questions for me, you can always reach out via humanestartup.com, and I look forward to talking with you all next week.